I was recently in Greece, and as I was in Greece, I had met a woman, let's call her Maria, and we had this torrid relationship and escalated very quickly. We were taking trips together, having a really great time. She was a lot of fun, great woman, beautiful. And we were traveling, to some islands, and we did a lot of really fun things together. I really started to like her. And she was telling me between dates and things like that she really didn't enjoy her job that much. She liked it okay, but it just didn't pay any real significant money. And so for that reason, she really didn't like what she felt stuck in. A few weeks into the relationship, I basically said, because I had already purchased a couple of tickets to go on a British Virgin Islands sailing trip. It's a magical trip, like a trip of a lifetime for almost anybody, including me, certainly for her, because she hadn't been to very many countries. And I said to her, hey, would you be interested in coming with me to go to the British Virgin Islands for a week or 10 days? And you know what she said to me? She said, it's impossible. First thing right out of her mouth, without even considering it, it's impossible. And I was like, wow. And so I said, what is impossible about it? She said, well, I've already gone to my boss and I said that I wanted to go to Italy and they told me no. And I said, well, you don't like this job very much. Why don't you quit? Well, you don't understand. I said, oh, okay. I'm just trying to understand. But basically the conversation kind of ended there because she said, if I leave, they will fire me. Now here's a competent, intelligent, beautiful, smart person that could probably find any job that she wants upon her return. But she felt like there was no possibility of her getting another job if she lost this one. And so this impossible word really has been sticking in my head. It's not even possible if you say impossible. What a limiting belief that is to say. Instead of not saying that word at first, maybe she could explore, are there other ideas? When somebody thwarts a piece of conversation by saying it's impossible, that's a limiting belief. And I recognize limiting beliefs in people now. In a bit, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about Elon Musk, but let's explore what limiting beliefs can do to your life or other people's lives, okay? So first of all, let's talk about the impact of these constraining beliefs that hold us back. And let's also see what the effects and maybe the solutions are to these limiting beliefs. So the first thing we want to do is understand them. And we have to understand how personalities are formed. So when we're born, we're basically these little sponges. And as these little sponges, we're looking around and all this information is coming at us visually, gustatorily. All the senses are involved, right? The hearing, the smell, everything. And so we're learning. We're just constantly sucking up all the information out there. And then as we grow a little bit older, it's our parents who give us information. It's our teachers, it's our friends, it's our family, our grandmothers, the TV, right? We start getting all this information and we're soaking it up and we create a personality. We're being programmed, right? And so if you don't have the right programming in, you start to build these limiting beliefs because you consciously and unconsciously adopt these notions of what are possible and what are impossible. You start to have constraining convictions and they create a little gap, right? Because you're like, well, I can't do that. I'll never do that. And so that's where it starts, is they're restricted beliefs that we consciously create because of our unconscious programming. And so how do we manifest them? Well, the gap between our existing reality and our envisioned reality, if we can even envision it. That's the problem, is sometimes we can't even envision it. And so anything comes into that realm where it's beyond what we can envision, we just immediately dismiss it. We never even see it. That's why so many people miss opportunities, because they're not tuned into seeing them, because they think they're impossible for them. The bottom line here is they become rooted in rationale and they become rooted in logic. And it's so hard to deprogram something that's rooted in logic. I remember hearing a quote just a few months ago that says, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And that's what most people do. They fight for those limitations because they believe that that's the truth. When in fact, there's so many other truths out there, but that's just not the truth that they're willing to believe. So you have to start to understand, what are the beliefs behind the self-perception? Because when you look at yourself in a mirror, you're getting a reflection back of yourself. So if you project something into the mirror, you're going to be receiving that back. If you project a limiting belief into the quote unquote unconscious mirror, that unconscious is going to confirm that that's what your belief is. And so you create identity around that conscious belief or that unconscious belief, right? And so you start to fight for it. You start to defend it. It starts to become who you are. You can end up having a diminished self-worth because that's the programming either you choose to accept, or it's the programming that you got hammered with, that you've eventually succumbed and believed. Or you could have elevated programming that makes you feel empowered. The question is, do you have the discipline required for changing the limiting beliefs? That's really the key. You have to have the discipline. And that comes from a decision. One of the tools that I use is when I realize that I'm kind of backed into a corner on a limiting belief. First of all, it's really hard to stop and say, wait a minute, maybe that's a limiting belief on my part. But once I do that, then I just over respond and I say, what if the opposite were true? Like when I invited Maria to go to the British Virgin Islands and she said it's impossible, instead of saying it's impossible, what if she just stopped and said, wait a minute, this would be really possible. And look at all the benefits that I would get from that. And maybe I would even come back and get a better job, like just a totally different paradigm. So, there's lots of examples of limiting beliefs, but, if you've ever tried to start a business and you tell people that have never started businesses around you about your business, a lot of times you'll get that, oh, it's already been done before, and they dismiss you. Or they'll say, well, that'll never work, right? So you'll miss that opportunity because maybe you put a lot of weight into what those people are saying because your limiting beliefs are limiting anyway, and you're trying to break through them, and you're getting reinforced that other people either don't see the potential in you or they want to reinforce those limiting beliefs because maybe they don't want to lose you. I know when Elon Musk started SpaceX, he said, well, I'm going to go compete against the government. Everybody laughed at him. They said, wait a minute, you're going to compete against this multi-billion dollar agency like NASA that's been putting up spaceships for the last 60 years? You're going to compete against that. Yeah, good luck with that. And he was like, okay, he believes in himself. He doesn't have those limiting beliefs in there. And he kept plodding along and he raised some money for SpaceX. And, he raised the limited people believed in him because he had done some things in the past. He put a lot of engineering and a lot of thought and built a team around that first rocket that went up, and it went up and it crashed. And he could have stopped there. Most people would say that's a failure and he could have stopped there. But Elon Musk doesn't look at things that way. He says, it's not a failure. Look at how much I learned from that space launch. So he took it, whatever he learned, and he put it back into building the second rocket. And then a few months later, it came time to launching the second rocket, and it went up and it crashed. And again, people said, well, you should have just walked away then. But he didn't believe it was a failure. He believed that now he was getting closer. And then basically he had all of his money and all of investors' money all tied up in that last launch, the third launch. And it was a successful launch. But the third launch wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the other two launches. He could have quit at any point along the way, but he didn't have that limiting belief holding him back. He believed in himself, and he believed that he could compete against the U.S. government. I remember when I was growing up, I had a mother who's a little bit, has some issues, and she screamed a lot. And I remember saying it, as I got a little older, God, you scream all the time. And she said, well, that's just the way I am, very indignantly. That's just the way I am. And I thought, wow, what a cop-out. That's just the way I am is your excuse to not change. So she fought for that limiting belief that she had because that was her identity. She believed that she was a jerk to people and that there's no way that she could change because that's just the way she was. And so why even put any effort into it? And as a result, she just drove everybody away from her in her life because she was refusing to change. She had a limiting belief, unfortunately for her. As we move toward what this is all about, you have to understand that there's power in being aware of your limiting beliefs, and there's power in choice in changing them. So you got to ask the question, is this a limiting belief? Is this a limiting belief? I wonder if that's a limiting belief. You have to constantly ask that question because if you can discover that it is, then maybe you can acknowledge it and be aware. You know what I always say, awareness is the first step to change. And now what do? You start to expand the potential for opposing beliefs. Like maybe something else is possible rather than this limiting belief. And what is the impact of these conscious choices that I've been making on my growth, on my transformation? That all shines light on the way that you can change. So maybe now you start embracing different beliefs, more empowering beliefs. And like when you quit smoking, you got to replace it with something else. You replace one bad habit with a good one. Same thing here. You start to substitute your limiting beliefs with more empowering ones. And then you start to strengthen your identity as someone who grows. That's the identity I have, someone who loves to learn and grow. And someone who loves to learn and grow can't be saying, I can't learn and grow. It's the opposite that makes it true for me. At the end of the day, you have to understand there are limiting beliefs. They're not your fault. It's okay. Just understand that there are ways to get out of it. You got to embrace them, acknowledge them, be aware of them, replace them, and start to live into that new identity that you're creating for yourself because now you understand the concept of removing those limiting beliefs. Hey, it's Mark Yegi, founder of Light Circle. And if you want to be productive in your life, you've got to get a hold of my daily productivity planner. Now, it's not this whole book. It's just one of the sheets from this book. The whole book is awesome, but just the sheet is really the foundation of what we do. And it's how I get tons and tons of stuff done every week, including writing books and making videos and running hedge funds and all the other stuff that I do. You've got to get this daily productivity planner if you want to massively improve your success. So click on the link below or somewhere on this page, download the thing for free, put in your email address, we'll send you the link, and then you can start filling it out right away. By the way, after you do it, I give you a little video on how to fill it out because it's got all these really cool tools on it that are really going to massively help you with your productivity. See you on the inside.